1 week later, at the courthouse.
All rise for the Honorable Judge Alfred Smith.
You may all be seated. All right. Court is now in session. Tiyana Gavin, I've called this hearing because you've been charged for the following. Prosecutor Henry Maverick, read the charges.
Tiyana Gavin, you're charged with aggravated assault, grand theft auto, breaking and entering, kidnapping, inappropriate flirting, obstruction of justice, and worse, child abuse.
How do you plead?
Not guilty. Most of those charges are completely false. I was only doing what was best for my family. But they never appreciated what I provided for them.
On the contrary, there's evidence to prove your statement false, and those charges to be proven correct. So, I call upon my first witness, Gunther.
Tiyana Gavin is a thief. She ran up to me, threw me out of my bike, stole it, used it to skip traffic, and crashed at the construction zone. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Objection, Your Honor. I only told Gunther Russo that I was commandeering his bike. I did not steal it.
Overruled. Commandeering someone's vehicle is the very definition of grand theft auto, and you used it to skip traffic before crashing it at a construction zone. As for you, Gunther, you may now be seated. I call upon my next witness, Phil Andrews.
Tiyana Gavin's got a lot of anger issues and has no patience whatsoever. When I was stuck in traffic, she kept honking at me and demanding me to move during a red light. And upon stealing Gunther Russo's motorcycle, she used it to skip traffic. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Objection, Your Honor. I was in a rush to bring my daughters, Stephanie and Natalie, home. They both ran away.
While I understand that your daughters ran away from home, your objection's still overruled because they ran away for a good reason. Hence, the charge for child abuse. Thank you, Mr. Andrews, for your testimony. I call upon my next witness, Officer Ellen McShane.
Tiyana's as much of a psychopath as my wife, Rachel. First she escaped from jail upon getting arrested for giving her own daughter Stephanie a punishment day. Then she looked up how to make a bomb on the same daughter's computer and thus, framing her for the incident. Then she met my wife while sneaking out of her house while grounded. Then she teamed up with Rachel, Boris, Karson, Doris, and Elena to ground the whole world. Then she escaped from jail again upon getting arrested for getting in dead meat. Then while on the run, she assaulted me and my partner, Officer Drake Larson, when we pursued her. And worst of all, she co-founded a hit squad of child abusers with Boris. Therefore, I say she's guilty as charged.
Thank you, Officer McShane. I call upon my next witness, Kendra Dale.
Tiyana's as much of a child abuser as Pierre Webster. She grounded Stephanie for everything including visiting my son Michael, Lucy McCall, and Zara Dawson. And after when the Punishers were formed, she had Pierre break into our house to interrogate Michael about Stephanie and Natalie's whereabouts. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Mrs. Dale. I call upon my next witness, Mrs. McCall.
Tiyana's nothing more than an entitled Karen. She grounded Stephanie for everything she does, including hanging out with my daughter Lucy, Michael Dale, and Zara Dawson. Then she broke into my house to interrogate Lucy about the whereabouts of Stephanie and Natalie. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Mrs. McCall. I call upon my next witness, Dawson.
Tiyana's a stalker, a bully, and a psychopath. First she grounded Stephanie for everything she does, including hanging out with my daughter Zara, Michael Dale, and Lucy McCall. Then she fat-shamed me by calling me a fat pig. Then she played ding-dong ditch at my house and jump-scared me in the forest after when I chased her all throughout town. And finally, she assaulted me and my wife Kimberly at the restaurant. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson. I call upon my next witness, Alan Jones.
I thought that Tiyana was a bad parent the day I fired her upon finding out that she's been abusing Stephanie and her siblings in Debs and Cass Animate's channels. But now she's much worse. She had Miss Martin break into my house to interrogate my daughter Serenity about the whereabouts of Stephanie and Natalie. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I call upon my next witness, JG the Animator 05.
Tiyana's a child abuse supporter and a highly destructive woman. First she demanded a chicken scampi and a second engagement with her husband Diesel. Then she destroyed the Olive Garden where she did the first two things I just said. And finally, she did a salute on Roku kun the Vyonder. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Objection, Your Honor. While I understand her salute on me triggered my haters even more, you can't make that into a crime.
Overruled. Now Roku kun the Vyonder, sit back down.
Yes, Your Honor.
I call upon my next witness, Animation Sensation 02.
Tiyana's not the kind of loving mother I thought she was in my channel. In Karson Animate's channel, she teamed up with Clubbers and Dominique Rodriguez to ruin his enlightening me in Star Animation's 8th birthday. Then she destroyed Olive Garden. Then she grounded me for threatening to cut ties with her the next time she causes trouble. And finally, she saluted on Roku the Vyonder while ranting on me and Joseph Garbett. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Animation Sensation 02. I call upon my next witness, Waleedarix.
Tiyana's even worse than how Stephanie acted in my Grounded series out of the latter. She teamed up with Katherine Johnson and Miss Martin to act entitled towards everyone. Then she grounded me for not re-uploading my Grounded series out of Stephanie. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Waleedarix. I call upon my next witness, Brainiac Adam.
Tiyana's even worse than the Alanis Thames, Lama's parents, and Janet Gray. She along with Katherine Johnson and Miss Martin acted entitled towards everyone, including me. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Brainiac Adam. I call upon my next witness, Valerie Marquez.
Tiyana's a bad influence on Elena. First she invited her, Miss Martin, Amy Edmond, and Katherine Johnson over to her house for a slumber party. Then she and Elena teamed up with Boris, Keris, Terrace, and Rachel McCann aka the Loco Irish Mamie to ground the whole world. And finally, she grounded Dora for grounding Elena. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Valerie. I call upon my next witness, Althea Andrea.
Mrs. Gavin's an entitled Karen. She grounded me just for being friends with Stephanie. Then she threatened to kill my mum after when Mrs. McCann kidnapped me and my family. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Objection, Your Honor. Angelina Armstein betrayed my trust. She helped my husband keep Stephanie and Natalie away from me.
Overruled. If you and Angelina were really friends, you wouldn't have threatened to kill her if she did something behind your back. And that makes you a very bad friend. Anyway, I call upon my next witness, Arrimas Arrington.
Tiyana's taken grounding to a whole new level that not even classic Caillou could ever stoop to. She grounded the whole world alongside Boris, Corey's, Tori's, Elena, and Rachel. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Arrimas Arrington. I call upon my next witness, Ice Willow 9.
Tiyana's as much of an entitled Karen as Katherine Johnson and Miss Martin. They worked together to act entitled towards everyone, including me, Nick the Animator 2K5, Anthony the Flash Themes Fan 2K6, Karson Animate, and Little KJ the Vyonder. Then the three of them had a slumber party with Elena and Amy Edmond. And finally, Tiyana ungrounded Katherine and grounded her husband Dave at the same time. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Ice Willow 9. I call upon my next witness, Karson the Geometry Dash and Animation Boy 2K10, aka Karson Animate.
Tiyana's caused trouble that's much worse than the trouble she caused in mine and DotZz's respective channels. And she's even more psychotic and entitled than ever before. First she teamed up with Katherine Johnson and Miss Martin to act entitled towards everyone, including me, Little KJ the Vyonder, and Filbert the Vyonder Boy 2K4. Then she did a salute on Roku kun the Vyonder and ranted on me, Animation Sensation 2, JG the Animator 05, and Crowtoon Productions Incorporated, who I recently subscribed to. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Karson Animate. I call upon my next witness, Rick Animates 2K7.
Tiyana's even worse than Julie Peterson and Daniel Hudson. When Crowtoon Productions Incorporated confronted her during her slumber party, she knocked him out. Then she trapped us both, along with Crowgirl 22, Lysis Cabrera, Solidarity Special Cupboy 895, and SB Star Yellow Animator 03. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Rick Animates 2K7. I call upon my next witness, Jessica McIntyre.
Tiyana's as much of a psycho Karen as her husband Diesel said. She refused to have the shrimp scampi instead of the chicken scampi in an immature and violent manner. Then she destroyed the Olive Garden I used to work at. Next she snuck into the Rapper City Mall to steal clothes that were all black for her gang of child abusers, the Punishers. And finally, she kidnapped me and the McKennas and trapped me and Caitlin McKenna in her secret hideout, which was an abandoned grey house downtown. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Jessica McIntyre. I call upon my next witness, Michelle Berkman.
Tiyana never takes kindly to betrayal. First she grounded Bongo for improving on his behavior in Karson Animate's channel. Then she threatened to kill Angelina Armstrong. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Ms. Berkman. I call upon my next witness, Caitlin McKenna.
Tiyana's a psychopath who's as much of an opportunist as Boris claimed Miss Martin to be. First she assaulted Diesel and Kimberly Dawson at the Rapper City restaurant. Then she stole clothes that were all black at the Rapper City Mall for her hit squad of child abusers known as the Punishers. Then she kidnapped me, my family, and Jessica, and while she trapped me and Jessica at that house, she trapped my husband Simon and our son Brian in a dungeon where she forced my son to watch her flirt with my husband. And to further add insult, she made my son cry when she, along with Boris, Tories, Corey's, Elena, and Rachel grounded the whole world. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Mrs. McKenna. I call upon my next witness, Brenda Glover.
Tiyana's as much of a psychopath as my husband Big Bill. They teamed up to make an attempt at brutally assaulting Stephanie and Little Bill while we were at the park. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Brenda. I call upon my next witness, Michael Davidson.
Tiyana is a bad influence on not just Elena, but on my wife Julie too. She had Elena interrogate the worker at McDonald's while my son Alan was throwing a tantrum over a Happy Meal. The second Elena ran into the McDonald's where Alan kept demanding the Happy Meal, she picked my son up and threw him out of the restaurant, thus severely injuring him. Therefore, I say that Tiyana is guilty and I want to file my wife for a divorce because she joined the Punishers.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. And you can sign the divorce paper after the trial. I call upon my next witness, Juliet Beck.
Tiyana's impatience is a bad influence on one of her fellow Punishers in particular. She sent the notorious Brett Sinclair to interrogate me about her 2 daughters at KFC, and because of that, he held up the line. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Ms. Beck. I call upon my next witness, RichieToonz.
Adding to what the cashier at KFC just mentioned, from what I heard, Tiyana grounded Brett's son Clyde for grounding him and his wife Grace for causing trouble in Carson's channel. She even allowed him to threaten to kill both Clyde and Grace for refusing to go to his room upon getting wrongfully grounded and defending Clyde respectively. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, RichieToonz. I call upon my next witness, Ben Usher.
Tiyana's brute force method is a bad influence on a fellow member of these so-called Punishers in particular. When I was trying to take an order from the Davidson family while one member of said family threw a temper tantrum over a Happy Meal, Elena ran in to throw him out of McDonald's. Because of that, the family member in question was severely injured moments before Elena interrogated me about the whereabouts of Tiyana's daughters, Stephanie and Natalie. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Ben Usher. I call upon my next witness, Ruben Newman.
Aside from what happened at McDonald's and KFC, Tiyana sent another member of the Punishers named Herman Cain over to Burger King to interrogate me about Stephanie and Natalie. Then another member of the Punishers named Amy Edmond came over to issue some kind of retreat for some reason. Even I didn't know what it was. But nevertheless, I say that the defendant in question's guilty as charged.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. I call upon my next witness, Doris Anderson.
Tiyana's done more stuff with Boris than she did in Little KJ the Vyonder's channel. They both cheated on me and Diesel Gavin with each other. Then she grounded Kai for taking pictures of her falling in love with Boris. Then she and Boris grounded the whole world with his brothers Corey's and Tori's, Elena, and Rachel. Then they both broke into Crow-Toon Productions Incorporated and Crowgirl 22's house to force them to stop getting them grounded. And finally, they co-founded the Punishers together. Therefore, I say she's guilty. And I want to file Boris for a divorce.
Go ahead. I dare you. Boris would be better off with me than an ugly woman like you.
Oh, I'll show you ugly, you psychotic.
Silence. Order in the court. Order in the court. That's enough fighting. Tiyana, stop trolling Doris. You already angered your husband during the war between your respective gangs. As for you, Doris, you can file Boris for a divorce after the trial. I call upon my next 3 witnesses, Zara, Erica, and Annabelle Dawson.
Wait. Zara, Erica, and Annabelle are all testifying against me at the same time?
That's right, Mrs. Gavin. Anyway, Your Honor, thanks for allowing me and my sisters to testify at the same time. Anyway, Mrs. Gavin's gone too far with our parents and Stephanie.
First she barged into our house to ground Stephanie for hanging out with our sister Zara. Then she fat-shamed our dad by calling him a fat pig. Then Mrs. Gavin played ding-dong ditch with our dad and jump-scared him in the forest. Then she made us and our brother Zack cry when she grounded the whole world.
Then she assaulted our parents at the Rapper City restaurant. And finally, she had these punishers interrogate all of Stephanie's friends, including me, about her and Natalie. Therefore, we all say that she's guilty.
Thank you, girls. I call upon my next witness, Paul Edmund.
Tiyana's a bad influence on my wife, Amy. She invited her, Elena, Miss Martin, and Katherine Johnson to her house for a slumber party. Then she ungrounded Amy for abusing our sons. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Paul. I call upon my next witness, Dave Johnson.
Tiyana's even scarier than my entitled Karen of the wife Katherine. First she teamed up with her and Miss Martin to act entitled towards everyone in the entire city. Then she invited them, Elena and Amy, to the Gavin house for a slumber party. And finally, she ungrounded Katherine for that in a way she disciplines me and our kids. And when I overheard her ungrounding Katherine, Tiyana then came towards me and grounded me for refusing to let Katherine be ungrounded for life. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Dave, Katherine would like to have a word with you.
Not so fast. You will not allow Katherine Johnson to confront her husband. I will not have temper tantrums being thrown at this courthouse.
Thanks, Your Honor.
You're welcome, Mr. Johnson. I call upon my next witness, Diesel Gavin.
Don't you dare testify against me, Diesel.
Sorry, Tiyana, but you leave me no choice. Your Honor, my crazy wife's been causing lots and lots of mayhem and abusing our kids for weeks. She gave Stephanie a punishment day, got her arrested by looking up how to make a bomb on her computer, grounded her for everything she does, played ding-dong ditch with Dawson, jump-scared him in the forest, installed her own operating system onto Eric's computer, blew an air horn at Natalie at 5:30 in the morning, threw Terrence out our bedroom window, pushed Elizabeth into the pool while Natalie went to get Ploides for her, scared Joseph at night, destroyed Olive Garden, grounded animation sensation O2 for testifying against her on the news, teamed up with Katherine and Miss Martin to act entitled towards everyone in the entire city, grounded Waleedarix for not re-uploading his grounded series out of Stephanie, cheated on me with Doris, grounded Caillou for warning Stephanie and Doris about Tiyana's affair, hosted a slumber party while our kids and I were at the Great Willt Lodge, met Rachel McShane, teamed up with her, Doris, Chorus, Taurus, and Elena to ground the whole world, grounded Dora, Clyde, Althea, Andrea, Div, and Bungo for invalid reasons, turned Crow-Toon Productions Incorporated fat, turned him into a girl, ungrounded Amy and Katherine, teamed up with Big Bill to make an attempt to brutally assault Stephanie and Little Bill with spot bats, teamed up with Boris to force Crow-Toon Productions Incorporated to stop getting them grounded, placed all of our kids under Spanking probation, stole someone's motorcycle, skipped traffic, obstructed justice, shoplifted at the Rapper City Mall, co-founded the Punishers with Doris, interrogated the whole town about Stephanie and Natalie's whereabouts, threatened to kill Angelina Armstrong for working undercover for my insurgency, and finally, she declared war on my entire insurgency. Therefore, I say she's guilty, and I want to divorce her, permanently.
Thank you, Diesel Gavin. You can sign the divorce papers after the trial. I call upon my next witness, Eric Gavin.
My mom's become an expert hacker. Aside from installing her own operating system onto Stephanie's laptop and hacking Master Animation's 2K6's accountant Karson Animate's channel, she installed her own operating system onto my computer. Then, when she placed me and my younger siblings under spanking probation, she spanked me, Stephanie, and Natalie. Then she spanked me a second time, spanked Terrence, Elizabeth, and Terrence, and beat our dad up for attempting to call the police on her for grand theft auto and skipping traffic. And finally, she waged war on the insurgency. Therefore, I say that my mom's guilty of all charges.
Thank you, Eric. Gavin. I call upon my next witness, Terrence. Gavin.
My mom's done a lot of terrible stuff to me in DotZz, Karson Animate, and Zack Animate's respective channels, including turning me into a girl and shaving my head. But now there are two things she did that are much worse. First, she threw me out the window like Stephanie did in her original creator's channel. Then she spanked me, Elizabeth, Joseph, and Eric, and knocked our dad out when we attempted to call the police on her for stealing someone's motorcycle and skipping traffic. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Terrence. I call upon my next witness, Elizabeth. Gavin.
My mom's got a reckless disregard for my vulnerabilities. She pushed me into the pool during the summertime. Then she spanked me, Eric, Terrence, and Joseph, and knocked our dad out. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Objection, Your Honor. I was having Elizabeth learn how to swim on her own.
Overruled. Pushing your youngest daughter into the pool is not the way to teach her how to swim. As evidence to the contrary, you tried to drown her. Now, with that out of the way, I call upon my next witness, Joseph. Gavin.
My mom's even crazier than before. First she scared me when I was in bed. Then she spanked me, Eric, Elizabeth, and Terrence, and knocked our dad out for trying to call the police. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Joseph. I call upon my next witness, Natalie. Gavin.
My psycho Karen of a mother's gone too far this time. First she blew an air horn at me at 5:30 in the morning. Then she spanked me twice when she placed us under spanking probation. The first time she spanked me was for eating my own after when she spanked Stephanie for refusing to eat her cereal. Then she spanked me, Eric, and Stephanie all at once. I have no choice but to find my mom guilty.
Thank you, Natalie. I call upon my next witness, Stephanie. Gavin.
My psycho Karen of a mother's gone completely berserk. First she gave me a punishment day. Then she got me arrested by looking up how to make a bomb on my computer. Then she grounded me for waking up, correcting her, using the bathroom, having breakfast, hanging out with Michael Dale, Lucy McCall, and Zara Dawson, and going to bed. Then she spanked me 3 times when she placed me and my siblings under spanking probation. The first time she spanked me was a demonstration for the spanking probation. The second time was for refusing to eat the cereal she gave me. And the third time was for talking about how crazy she is behind her back with Eric and Natalie. I hate her so much. She's supposed to love me, but it's the exact opposite. I don't ever want to live with her anymore. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Stephanie. And finally, I call upon my last 2 witnesses, Crowtoon Productions Incorporated, and Crow Girl 22.
Are you serious? The 2 lovebirds are testifying against me?
Yeah, that's right. Prepare to face justice, Psycho Karen. Anyway, Your Honor, Tiyana has become an even bigger Psycho Karen in my channel than she did in the channels of the Animators who inspired me to make a Grounded series out of her.
In the behind-the-scenes segment of our Grounded series, she beat my boyfriend up twice, the second time being when she interrupted our interview with Diesel Gavin.
And when we were interviewing Eric, she threatened to silence my girlfriend when she ran to tell Diesel she interrupted our interview with the same son.
She then tried to brutally assault Terrence, Elizabeth, and Joseph for challenging her when she overheard what Terrence will do if she eavesdropped on him a second time.
Then when she interrupted our interview with Stephanie, Tiyana threatened to assault all 3 of us and to break Crow Girl 22's neck if we tried to save her.
Then when Crowtoon Productions Incorporated confronted Tiyana about the slumber party she hosted with Elena, Amy Edmond, Katherine Johnson, and Miss Martin, she knocked him out.
Then she trapped us in her basement along with Liz Caprera, Rick Adamits 2K7, SB Star Yellow Animator 03, and Solidarity Special Couple 895.
Then she teamed up with Miss Martin and Catherine to act entitled towards everyone, including S, Waleedarix, Brainiac Adam, and Captain Sasha.
Then she tried to force us to stop getting her grounded 3 times. The first 2 times involved the use of rap logic. The first time she used rap logic was to make me fat. The second time she used rap logic was to turn me into a girl, which was even more humiliating because I didn't want anyone, especially Crowgirl22, to see me like that.
And the third time she tried to stop her grounded series was by teaming up with Boris to break into our house and brutally assault us.
And finally, when she went home to confront the Isel and Eric about the insurgency, she broke the 4th wall by slapping me in the face when I said how many people were part of it.
Therefore, we agree to say that Tiyana is guilty as charged.
Thank you Crowtoon Productions Incorporated, and Crowgirl22. I call upon the defendant, Tiyana Gavin.
I object to everything my family, Crowtoon Productions Incorporated, and Crowgirl22 just said. The 2 lovebirds have been humiliating me with their grounded series out of me. And as for my family, like I said before, I only wanted what was best for my family. And Stephanie's the worst daughter a mother could ever have. She's been causing all sorts of trouble in a lot more channels than doing something good. She's been bullying other students and committing crimes everywhere.
Overruled. Grounding Stephanie and getting her arrested for causing all sorts of trouble is enough of a punishment as it is. And what you did to her was basically child abuse. You've been a terrible mother to all of your kids, and a terrible wife to your soon-to-be ex-husband. Now go back to where you were before calling you over to the stand. Now, according to all witnesses' stories, I hereby find you, Tiyana Gavin, guilty. Therefore, I hereby sentence you and the rest of your gang to 30 years in prison for all of your terrible actions, and you'll be forced to sign the divorce forms. Officer McCarthy, take her away. Case dismissed.
Alright Tiyana. This is your cell. You'll be staying in here until you're close to 70 years old. And don't even think about escaping. If you do, your sentence will be even longer.
This is so unfair. I can't believe I have to stay in jail for 30 years and I got divorced by Diesel. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me.
The end.
Ah, shut up. I'll have my revenge.